Hi everybody, this week is World Breastfeeding Week. And last week I did a podcast interview, and in the discussion we touched on this concept of breastfeeding and the environment in utero and how it affects the developing fetus, and subsequently, depending on the maternal state of the mother, whether she's under stress or her emotional state, how this can affect the developing fetus. And in 2003, I went to my first American Association of Naturopathic Physicians conference. I was still a student at that time, and there was a really interesting lecture that was given by a woman named Sandra Steingraber. She is a biologist and an ecologist, and her topic was about, I'm just looking back at my notes because I have the book from that time. The lecture was called Protecting the First Environment, Thoughts on Pregnancy, Breast Milk, and Ecological Contamination. And one of the things that I learned from her was that breast milk may not always be the best option. And I know that this is going to sound very controversial to everybody because most people say, that breast is best. So I want to get that out of the way first, that I'm not here to blame people who breastfeed or to criticize breastfeeding or to blame people who formula feed. I think that what we need to do more is support people in the decisions that they decide to make. So, for example, what we need to understand is that children are being born more toxic. There was a study done by the Environmental Working Group, and actually I have it right here. This was published in the Edmonton Journal, and it said that the study found 287 industrial pollutants in cord blood of babies. So this is a huge increase from the 1950s. And I think we have to understand that the environment, so the planet that we're living on, is no longer the same planet. It is much more chemically burdened than it has ever been at any other point in history. And as a result, children are being born with their cups already full, and we, as the maternal influence, we're also toxic. And so what I learned is that we need to get the chemicals out of the environment as much as we can. We need to also get the chemicals out of our bodies as much as we can. And when I went to make my career change back in 1999, one of my friends who's an OBGYN, she said to me, Chris, you should go back and study environmental medicine. And at that point, I was like, environmental medicine? I'm not interested in that. I'm interested in mental health. That's why I want to go back to school and help people. But the interesting thing is, she was right on the money. She was right on with her sense of understanding that the environment plays a huge role, not only in mental health, but in the health of our children that are being born. And so I did a year-long detoxification program before I conceived my son Noah, and we tested our son. We tested his hair levels of minerals in his hair, both toxic and essential. When he was 6 months old, we shaved his head, sent the sample in, and he had high levels of lead in his system. Now, both my husband and I had high levels of lead as well. So here's a newborn baby, only been on the planet 6 months, hasn't had a lot of time to develop a huge burden in his body, but he's already born with some burden passed on from us. And so I think what we want to be open-minded to is that in the formula fed babies, the fat, I'm just going to read my notes here that I took. She said that the fat comes from a plant source, and And this plant source is less contaminated than the animal fat or lipophilic fats that come from, potentially from the mother, depending on where that mother grew up, where she, how much detoxification work she did. And so I'm just wanting to just bring awareness to this piece. I'm not saying that if you're toxic and you're breastfeeding that that's necessarily a bad thing. Well, actually, maybe I am saying that. I'm wanting you to think about breastfeeding in a different way, perhaps, and not feel bad. A lot of my patients feel terrible if they are unable to breastfeed. And a lot of times I think that depending on how much terrain work you've done, that's why we've named our business Natural Terrain Naturopathic Clinic, because it's all about the terrain or the environment of your body. And the more work you can do to support detoxification pathways and help to get rid of some of these environmental pollutants out of your system, then the better off your children are going to be. So that's the message that I wanted to send you today.